Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Spooky Middle Grade Book Club live for November. Can you believe it's already the end of November? Woo, wow, time flies, but we are thrilled to be here discussing Midnight at the Barclay Hotel with author Fleur Bradley. Welcome. And so I'm going to let Fleur, we're going to talk to Fleur and ask all of our burning questions, of course. But before we get started, let's kind of see who else is joining us. We have some spooky friends who are going to be grilling Fleur with all their burning questions. So Erin, why don't you give us a little introduction?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Erin Petty. I'm the author of The Peculiar Haunting of Thelma B. And I'm a big fan of Midnight at the Barclay Hotel. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I know we have Josh and Yoda, it looks like. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Josh Allen. I'm an even bigger fan of Midnight at the Barclay Hotel. Erin, we'll arm wrestle over this later. So I'm the author of 2 collections of short stories, Out to Get You, 13 Tales of Weirdness and Woe, and Only If You Dare, 13 Stories of Darkness and Doom. And I'm so excited to talk with Fleur about her book. And so thank you for letting me join.
Yeah, and of course, I'm the biggest fan of Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, so I'm really excited to be here. And I'm the author of several middle grade books, including these babies. So I'm super excited. I'm also a huge mystery fan. I mean, all of my books have some kind of mystery in them, of course, like most books do, but I've never really written a true mystery, but I love true mystery. So I'm really excited to talk about this one. And Fleur, let me give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your books. I know you also have more books than Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, including one that's coming up, right?
Yes, that's true. So I'm Fleur Bradley, as everybody's talked about. And Midnight at the Barclay Hotel is my 4th book. I wrote 3 books in the Double Vision series, which is kind of like Spy Kids. But those are more thrillers. Midnight at the Barclay Hotel is definitely kind of my ode to mystery. So in a nutshell, it's about these 3 kids who are invited along with the adults in their lives to come to the Barclay Hotel for a weekend getaway. Everybody thinks it's going to be super fun and it's a little spooky. So one of the kids likes to ghost hunt, JJ. So they're all excited to go. And it turns out actually that they're there to solve the mystery of Mr. Barclay's murder. So the book goes through kind of how to find motive, means, opportunity. It has clues in there. So it's a great introduction for kids to a murder mystery without being scary, and a little bit of spooky in there as well, which of course appeals to all the authors here today. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, and that's Midnight at the Barclay Hotel.
Yeah, of course we have to have the spookiness, but I love because some of my favorite books are like The Westing Game, or when I was a kid, I grew up reading all the Agatha Christie mysteries. Like, I don't know why I was so drawn to them when I was like 9 or 10. I remember we had this little like used bookshop where you could trade in the books. And so, yeah, it was super fun. So I would go and get like one of those old like Agatha Christie paperbacks from like the 50s and 60s. I would read it and then I'd trade it in for the next one. And so I'd read all the Poirots and all the Miss Marples. I was like super fun. And there's so many like fun, hilarious things that tend to happen in those, like the mysterious invitation to like maybe a mysterious hotel or like a murder, is announced or something like that. The group of individuals that, are all drawn together in this country house and we know like murders are about to happen. secret identities. Not so much ghosts, but I love, I love the ghostly element there that's been added. So I just love like all of these things that are kind of classic to that. Like you wrapped up a lot of them in this book. So I'm wondering, like, what were your main inspirations that you drew from for this one? And like, just, I can imagine how much fun it was to kind of like pepper a lot of those things into this story.
It was a lot of fun to write. And I kind of gave myself that sort of allowance. I thought to myself, well, I'll take a year and I'm just going to write the book that I really, really, really want to write. So when I was a kid, a bit like you, there was no YA section at my library, and I was a huge reader. And I'd read my way through most of the children's section of the library. And so, what's next? And a very nice librarian went, well, why don't you try Agatha Christie? So that's kind of how I was introduced to mysteries as well. And I was hooked right away. And it's that over the top setting, and it's a little bit theatrical that makes it feel a little bit removed. And I think that's why it works for this age group as well, because one other thing that kind of introduced me to trying to write this book was a librarian said, well, my kids really want a murder mystery. They want an actual murder. And this is for middle grade. So it's hard to pull that off and not make it, we don't want to make it bloody, scary, whatever. Or at least that wasn't my intent with this book. It has to be about the mystery of solving it. And it's that sort of cozy feeling, that removed element of the crime, where the crime has already happened when the kids come on and the suspects come on the scene, because all the adults that are there at the hotel are suspects, a bit like Agatha Christie stories. And they're all a little bit bigger. It's a little bit of a theater feel, where it does feel like entertainment. And I think that's what makes it work, and that makes that balance work for middle grade.
Yeah, that's so fun. There is a theatrical feel to a lot of the characters. And I like that you even have like one of the early chapters where you're introducing the players. And so we do get this sense that it's like, it's a puzzle, or it's like a game, or it's like, yeah. And there is even a game that is very similar to Clue that the characters play in the story, which I really liked. That's so fun. I mean, it is. So you really managed to turn it into a game, although there are these serious elements, and you have the sleuths that are like learning how to solve a mystery. But then, like, as often happens in a mystery, like as these sleuths are uncovering the backstory of what really happened, there are some like real, like emotional, like things that happen to like the people involved, but they get to like uncover them kind of at a distance, like you said. So I love that. I mean, I wonder, like, how did you go about coming up with the backstory for all of these really theatrical characters that you have?
It was just sort of allowing myself to get carried away with it a little bit, just to have fun. And part of it was also, I went to the Stanley Hotel here in Colorado, and that has a ton of history and a ton of backstory to it. So I kind of stole bits and pieces of the stories of the real people, what happened to them, how, some of them have lost people in their lives, some of the ghost stories that are haunting the hotel. And some of that is, it is serious business. And I think even for kids that are younger, that's okay, because a lot of them do know that sometimes things are hard, and sometimes terrible things happen and people die. And even though that's not the focus of the mystery as much, that is part of the story. You don't want it to be so shallow that it becomes a little bit of that there are no stakes. Basically, there do have to be stakes for the people involved, because someone obviously murdered Mr. Barclay. So there has to be a reason for that. So in the effort to sort of go, okay, well, what would be the motive, and what would be, a reason for someone to want Mr. Barclay dead? And he's obviously a rich man. He owns the hotel, and everybody has a motive to want him gone, which is kind of scary in a way. But it was fun to uncover it, because the way I wrote it also was, I didn't know when I set out who killed Mr. Barclay. I thought to myself, well, what better way to uncover the mystery than to be the sleuth myself, to sort of write the first draft and go, okay, everyone could have done it. So, because it makes it the most plausible, and it made the mystery most believable, and it makes it the most fun to uncover it first for me as a reader, and then or as a writer, and then later as I edited it for the reader to uncover who killed Mr. Barclay. So that was a very fun part. So as you can hear me talk about, it was a very fun book to write, definitely.
Yeah, I love that idea. I'm gonna let Erin and Josh get their questions, and I'm like so excited about mysteries though. And you're like reminding me of this, like every final scene in every Agatha Christie, well, in every Poirot mystery, when he like has the big dramatic reveal and he lays it out, and as he goes along, it seems like he's accusing every person because every person had a motive.
Yes, and that makes it good. Right. Yes.
Yes, I love that you're bringing that into the story. But let me turn the mic over though to Erin and Josh and see what questions they would like to ask.
So I love that you mentioned the Stanley Hotel, and because I wonder, when I was reading it, it was the hotel itself is so cool, right? Like there's so many different dimensions to it. There are so many different pieces to it. Is that all from the Stanley, or did you really just let your imagination go wild? Like, how did you build the hotel?
So the Stanley Hotel is in Estes Park, and in its original, when it was built a long time ago, over 100 years ago, it was very isolated. So it just sat on the mountain and looked down on the valley. And I believe, if my memory serves from my research, it was built by the owner for his wife who was ill. And by the time it was done, I think she was better. So it didn't, but it wasn't that unusual for people to come to Colorado to get better from tuberculosis, whatever, what have you. So that's what I started with. But if you go there now, the Stanley Hotel sits there, and Estes Park is right around it. So you can literally walk from Estes Park to the Stanley Hotel. I'm like, well, that's not going to work, because the other part is, of course, if, I kind of needed there to be no cell phone reception. Otherwise, it's a little too easy to pick up the phone, call the police, or what have you. So it's a bit of a cheat. I'm like, well, let's create my own hotel, and I'll call it the Barclay Hotel, and I'll set it on a mountain. So, everybody's truly isolated and they can't leave. Which is, of course, also the premise behind a lot of Agatha Christie mysteries, or mysteries in general. It's a bit popular of a thing now. Let's put everybody in an isolated location and see what happens. So that's a little bit where it started. I went on a ghost hunting tour at the Stanley Hotel, which was super fun, and kind of brought in all the stories. And it's a beautiful hotel with this beautiful woodwork, and it has this front room that overlooks the valley. And I'm like, oh, that's going to be great to model that. But then I thought, well, it needs to be kid friendly. So I thought, well, what if Mr. Barclay lost his daughter and built the hotel, or had a sick daughter in the hotel, and made the hotel like a kid's playground because the daughter can't leave because she's sick. So that was sort of a plausible story, again, building on this whole, you have to make it nice and you have to make it fun for kids, but then to sort of have a backstory and make it a little sad. And plus, because I could make my own hotel, I could kind of make it what I want, which is fun. And I didn't have to be quite so on the nose with all the details. I could make it my own town in my own place. But it was a lot of fun to build it, and then to make a map, because every good story has a map. So a map of the hotel, and got to draw all that. So that was fun. That was definitely one of the parts that kind of allowed me to truly go over the top, because it has a bowling alley and a pool and a spa. And I'm like, oh, it would be cool to put in a hotel. Let's put it in there. So that's kind of what I did. Yeah.
I have a question, Fleur. I want to talk about, or hear you talk about tropes a little bit. I think that mystery fiction, maybe more than any other genre, traffics really frequently in tropes. I mean, with the possible exception of horror, right? We traffic in tropes pretty frequently as well. So you've got, Kim's already mentioned kind of the mysterious invitations that appear. And you've already talked a little bit about the kind of remote hotel / manor house / crumbling Gothic castle that we often get in this genre. And I want to point out, I really, really love that they get snowed in I think that, I mean, obviously there's a storytelling reason for that. For the same reason they need to be on a remote
Yeah.
mountainside for a storytelling purpose. They also need to be snowed in at
Mhm.
some point for a storytelling purpose. But I also feel like when you use these tropes, you kind of wink at the reader a little bit, right? It's sort of um, like you pay homage to Agatha Christie very explicitly in this book, and I guess my question is, how do you use all of these tropes that readers have, even probably young readers have seen before, especially if they're interested in mystery, but then still make the story kind of unique, still make it your own, which of course you have done, right? You have a great flavor of your own in this story, even though you're using a lot of the ingredients that mystery stories use. So do you have any thoughts on that, or can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think in part the kids know some of it, but a lot of it they don't. So part of it is me introducing them to the tropes for the first time. So, but at the same time, there's that sense of humor, that feeling of a narrator in a very early draft. There were a lot of breaking the fourth wall and me addressing the readers. In the editorial, or that ended up on the cutting room floor. But I still think that that's what makes it work, is sort of taking all those cliches in a way, or tropes, and kind of taking them and just sort of being very deliberate about it and going, well, I'm going to go ahead and do those things. I'm going to do all the cliches and all the, the detective on the scene who doesn't really want to be there, and the butler, and some of the stuff that's cliche to us, but may not be yet to the kids. And I think you're right. I think it's by using that sense of humor and that sort of, I'm telling you a story and we're having some fun here, in sort of almost a Halloween-y sort of way, that it makes it okay, that it's an enjoyable, fun murder mystery in a way. And I think that Agatha Christie did that a little bit. If you read, or I've recently, because of the book, of course, reread some of it, and it makes you realize, she's good. She's sharp, she's funny. And there's a lot of that in there too, a little bit of we all know we're in on it together, but we're here for the fun, sort of thing. So there are definitely a lot of tropes in there. But what's sort of fun is that a lot of the kids don't know them yet, especially because this book, with it being on the younger side of middle grade, ended up, which my other books were a little bit older, so it was a bit different. These were being read aloud a lot, and still are, in the classroom and by parents with kids, because everybody was stuck at home, came out during COVID. So some of it is kids truly, for the first time, reading something that is like this, but in a way that, with a voice that makes it, I think, sort of fun. I guess the kids are at least enjoying it, and nobody's afraid. So that's good. That was my biggest fear with it all, is that balance okay? And also, talking about mysteries, have I planted the clues fairly? Because that's also, it's being read, and it's working well for both adults and kids, but that's tricky because there's two pretty big plot twists in there, and I'm like, oh, am I being too obvious? Am I not being obvious enough? And that's always a balance as a mystery writer. But I don't think that matters if you're writing for kids or for adults. So that kind of covers a little bit of the mystery angle, I think.
For me, I felt like, as I was reading the tropes, if a kid were encountering this for the first time, that there would be like enormous pleasure in encountering this trope for the first time. And for me, an older reader, encountering some of these tropes, like the butler and the snowed-in remote hotel and this kind of stuff, it felt, you wrote it in such a way that for me, it felt like visiting an old friend.
Yeah, and that was sort of my thought too. Like, I'm going to take all the things that I love about mystery and put it in there. And I think it translates for adults in that same sense. We're like, oh yeah, I remember, reading Agatha Christie. I remember reading The West End Game, and oh yeah, look at this, and sort of kind of like, you're right, it's like an old friend.
Yeah, I love that. And when you're talking about kind of the, the little nod and wink to the reader and like the tongue-in-cheek narrator, I remember how much I love the narrator and also like how unusual, it was unexpected narration for me, because you don't see omniscient like narration very often, or you don't see like a really present like narrative voice. A lot of the time in middle grade, we just have the one main character and we're directly in their head. So there's not really a narrator in between us and the character. It's just we are seeing through the character's eyes. So I loved the snarky narrator. And I loved the moments when you kind of did break the fourth wall and you had those little kind of winks to the reader. I was like, I think that for me was what made it feel really original. Like as you're incorporating like all of these tropes, it was kind of that narrative voice that really made it obvious that, okay, like I know what I'm doing. I know that you know what I'm doing, and I'm just gonna have fun with it. So I'm wondering, like, how did you find that narrative voice, and did you always intend to have that really like present narrator?
So for my first books, I wrote first person from a perspective of kind of a sort of funny kid who always gets in trouble. And what was difficult for me, and took me a couple different tries, was coming out of that and then knowing, okay, what part of it is that character's voice and what part of it is mine. So this was really liberating in the way that I could go, okay, it's me telling the story, and I'm having a little bit of fun with it. And the very first chapter of the Barclay Hotel, which is where, the narrator sort of goes, well, the invitations went out and it was Tuesday, because on Tuesday you really catch people and they're going to all come, and etc. And it's that first chapter was kind of, and I have that a lot, was kind of for me to set the tone, to go, okay, this is how I'm going to write the story. And it's fun because it allows you to sort of go from character to character. In the very early draft of Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, it was a much longer book. And it was, there were lots of chapters in there written from the adult's perspective, or sort of, but with it being reshaped as being a bit of a younger middle grade, it's like, okay, we have to cut the word count. We're going to put illustrations in there. Something's got to go. And I immediately knew, well, I'm going to have to toss all the chapters from the adult's perspective. So that was like 15,000 words, I think it was, that I ended up chopping, which was hard because I really liked those. It was fun to follow the cowboy along in the hotel and watch him, be sort of clumsy, and all these really funny scenes and things where I'm like, but it's a better book for it, for the kids' sake. So yes, the narrator, the perspective was a deliberate choice, largely for me to sort of disconnect myself from that first person character that I wrote 3 books about, and to try to kind of go, okay, actually, when I am writing first person from this character Link's perspective, and he's kind of funny, it's actually me, So it was kind of me reclaiming that, going, okay, I'm the one telling this story now. So even in my next book, same, I've decided to take third person. I'm a little bit afraid to go back into the first person perspective, just because I'm afraid that that will become the character's voice, and it's hard to then reclaim it back. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's so interesting to me. It makes it, I've never written a book that had like a narrator per se. Like, I mean, most of my books are in third person, but they're directly, you're the character's voice the whole time, even though it's in third person. And so it's like, really, that would be like a real challenge, because you're creating sort of this whole new character that we never really meet, but they're telling the whole story. So I love that. That's so interesting to me. Well, Erin, I see that you're burning. You're just chomping at the bit to ask a question. So let me send it your way.
I am. I love your narrator, and I loved. And maybe I haven't read as many mysteries as the rest of you have, because I'm wondering, because I loved this so much, that everyone had a secret, and everyone's secret was so different because all of your characters are so different. Is that something that you would consider a trope in a mystery that it's kind of stated outright that everyone has a secret,
Oh,
or is
yeah.
that something that you discovered while you were writing the story?
I sort of uncovered it, but I do think that in a mystery, that's definitely one of those things that you'd use, because it's also something you can use when it's not something fairly innocent. So obviously, there's the mystery and the actual solving of the crime, but there's also all these red herrings, so the false clues that are sprinkled throughout. And as a writer, you want to make sure that you put enough of those in there so your reader goes, but oh, what about this? But what about this? And could it be this? And what, it needs to be all plausible in the end. And for the Barclay Hotel, I definitely chose, for that sort of theme of secrets to run throughout. So even the kids have secrets, and all the adults, of course, do.
I loved the kids' secret. I just like that was
Yeah.
something that just was in the scope of the larger story that was playing out. One of the things that just like resonated so deeply, it was just the note in his pocket from the school. And there's like murder and ghosts and I'm just like, oh God, but English class, right? And it's like, I think you did that so
Well, and it's
beautifully.
that feeling of you remember when you were that age, when
Yes.
something that doesn't seem like that big of a deal and maybe isn't at the time, it becomes bigger because you are keeping it a secret. So, and JJ, the character who has this secret, is literally carrying it in his backpack. So it's like having a monkey on your back. So it becomes bigger and heavier, and particularly since he's fairly close to his mom, and you're also, with it being middle grade at that age of sort of 12, you kind of get to the point where maybe you're starting to disconnect a bit from your mom, and some of the things that maybe had you very close are starting to change. And in JJ and his mom's case, that's also the case where, he's getting a bit older, so he doesn't need his mom in the same way anymore. She's busy with her work all the time. At the same time, he's kind of like, oh, I wish she had a bit more time for me. So there's a lot of that going on beneath the surface. And yes, it's that whole weaving of the secrets that was also kind of fun, because you're a little bit like a conductor. You're making everybody play their instruments. And in this book's case, literally, with it being the narrator like that, you are kind of going, okay, well, what about this person? What about this person? What about their secret? And what's the story there? So it was me uncovering it in the first draft, but then also going back and going, okay, let me make sure that I'm consistent enough here, that I'm planting the clues, and that the kids can, sort of figure out as they go, and that it's fair enough for them to draw the same conclusion at the very end, where it's like, oh, but of course it's this person. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always tough. Like, I mean, did you have to get a bunch of readers? Like, did you have critique partners or even young readers kind of read early versions to see like if the clues landed? That's so hard for me to gauge.
Yeah, it is. And that's hard. Not so much, but I think it's because I've been writing mysteries for a long time. So I wrote short mysteries for some time before I got into novel writing. But it is different in a novel as case, and I still have to go back and edit and kind of go, okay, am I planting enough clues? Is it too obvious? But because I read a lot of mysteries, you also get a little bit more practiced in going, okay, this is about the right balance, and this is about where it should be. And then there's an editor who will tell you, hey, this is no good, or this is too hard, or kids won't get this. And sometimes I'll disagree. I'll be like, no, the kids get this. They're smart. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, you're right. Dang it. It works out in editing usually, all of it. So.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I don't know if you mentioned the Puzzle-tastic Mysteries. I know you have a short story in that collection.
Yes.
But
I will grab it real quick so people can see the cover, because that's not hanging out behind me. It is this book. It's by Mystery Writers of America. So it's a collection of middle grade mysteries that are a little bit like Encyclopedia Brown, but a little bit longer. And then the solutions in the back for all the stories. I have a story in that one. And that one was really fun to write and just to do something completely different. And in short form again, which I had not done in a while, and for middle grade as well. So if anybody gets a chance to pick that one up, it's fun. And it sort of gets you a chance to test your clue hunting skills.
I know I haven't read that one yet, but I know, Josh, you are the short story master as well. So I'm like, yeah, I'd be curious to hear more about these like short mysteries that you wrote too, Fleur, because I think the short form is so different from writing novels.
It took me a long time to get comfortable with the storytelling length of novels. Now it's harder to switch back for me to short stories again. And particularly for kids, because there's only so many places that publish short stories for kids, with the exception of like Josh, where you have a collection of them, and his is brilliant, by the way. Both of them are. So I'm always I have great admiration for people who can do that and create a collection too like that, where it's cohesive and it's, instead of it being multiple authors, where it's just you and you have all these ideas. It's impressive, I think. So it's good to go back to it every once in a while. It's kind of like, there's the marathon running and then there's the sprint. And teachers used to go back to sprinting for a little bit again. Plus it's fun because then you finish something in a reasonable amount of time, where novels take so long and there's no guarantee all the time that stuff will get published. So sometimes you spend a lot of time on something that never makes it anyway. So.
Fleur, so I wonder, I have a question that I want to ask about the appeal of mysteries, why we are drawn to them, and why especially young readers tend to like them so much. When I was a kid, I remember just going crazy over, you mentioned Encyclopedia Brown. Those are some of my favorite books when I was a kid. And The Great Brain. I don't know if anybody else ever read The Great Brain.
Oh, it's been a long time. Yes. Yeah.
I just adored those books. And I think maybe every kid goes through a mystery reading period where they're just drawn to that. And when I was a kid, one thing I just loved about mysteries, especially mysteries written for children, is that, and you do this in your book, and I just love this. I think it's so smart and so brilliant to create a situation, a mystery where the kids figure things out that the adults can't. Right? Where children, this is what I loved about Encyclopedia Brown and The Great Brain, is you had the kids figuring things out, navigating the adult world even better than the adults themselves can navigate this world. And so I think that's one of the appeals to mystery. You said when we started this chat that this was the book you really, really, really wanted to write. So what is it about mysteries that you think people are so drawn to? Why do we love this particular kind of story so much?
For me, it makes me feel smart. So it makes me feel like, I got the clues, and if I get it before the end, sometimes I'll skip. I'll be bad. If I'm halfway through and I'm thinking, I think I know, I'll look in the back. So it's that, I think it's that sort of, can I get there before the detective? Can I figure out what's going to happen next? It's that hunt that's fun. And then I think for some of it is that motive angle is the why, why, what would, and in middle grade and in children's books, you can't really go too deep into that. But in the books for adults, I find that interesting to sort of look at what would make someone go from being an average person to someone who goes and murders someone, or steals or whatever. Breaking Bad, I thought, was brilliant in that way, which is horribly dark and totally not middle grade. But the motivation behind that character was very recognizable, even though he was in the end a horrible person. So it's that the psychology on the one hand, I think, of crime, and then the mystery of the puzzle and the solving, and can I outsmart the writer? Can I outsmart the detective? Do I get there first? Do I see something that they have not yet? So there's that. And I think that's for kids fun to sort of go along and go, I did not see that twist coming, or I did not see that coming. So I think that's a large part of the appeal, at least to me. And that was what I wanted to do with Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, is that there really wasn't anything that I could point my finger to other than old books like The Westing Game, which is really, it's a great book, but it is, it's several decades old. So
1978. I looked it
yeah.
up.
So, and ironically, has almost, a good chunk of it is from adult perspective. So even though it is considered a middle grade book, if you were really looking at it, that's not something that we can in the room here get away with. And that was the thing that went when I ended up editing my book, is the adult perspectives went. So in the end, that's not something that is today in publishing done a whole lot where there's adults. And in this case, it's definitely that puzzle solving of the kids that propels the story forward. And that's, I think, for me, the hardest thing to balance is to make that believable, to make it where that's realistic, that the adults are such bumbling fools that the kids beat them. At the same time, you all know this from our author visits that we do, those kids are smart. They are so much smarter than we are. So it's not, in that sense, it's not implausible that they would totally outsmart all the adults in an entire hotel. So, and it's fun to write that and to think of myself as a 12-year-old again and go, okay, what would be fun, at this point, and how could I move that mystery forward?
Yeah, I love that. It's so much fun, like you said, to kind of focus on the puzzle and to still have all the emotion and drama, but it's never scary because it's not really focused on the sleuths or the kid characters. I know you mentioned this before, but like Erin was saying, like the problems that the kids are personally dealing with are like very relatable and scary in their own way, like the report card thing, or like not wanting to show like your bad grades or whatever, but not really scary in like the big murder, like heavy emotional sense. But you can still have that stuff going on, because I mean that's even what happened in the like Agatha Christie mysteries, like Poirot really, until like the very last couple of novels, like never had any personal problems. Like he never changed. There was never any like emotional thing that he was going through. It was always like he was affecting the lives of the other characters, and he was unraveling all of the drama that was going on in their lives and the turmoil. So I think that kind of formula works pretty perfectly for middle grade, because you can have all of the hard like drama, murder going on, but it's never going to be the kids that are the ones like doing it or really directly affected by it. It's the other characters, and they're just like uncovering it. So I think that's pretty, yeah, that's interesting to think. Like mystery could be kind of like the perfect thing for middle grade. So I love that. But so I'm wondering, so this was kind of your little playground to like have fun with all of the mystery tropes and everything that we talked about. But you have a new novel coming up too. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And like, can we expect something in the same vein as Barclay Hotel?
It's similar. So it's like the older brother book of Barclay Hotel. So in a similar way, it's very more Alfred Hitchcock, I guess you could say. So
Nice.
there's 3 kids who are on a field trip to this island called Raven Island, and it's kind of like Alcatraz, or it's modeled after that. And they're stuck there overnight after the ferry leaves without them. So, and it's haunted. There's a ghost hunting crew there, and there's a mystery of what happened to some of the prisoners. So that's kind of Daybreak on Raven Island in a nutshell, and it's out next year in August. So just a little bit older, no illustrations on the inside, a little bit spookier, definitely, a little bit heavier on the spooky element, because it's a scary, scary place. And there's ravens in it, so that's really cool. Allowed me to have some fun in that regard. So.
Oh, that's cool. I love that idea of like, well, you kind of done the Agatha Christie style, so let's do like the Hitchcock style, and what will be next,
Yeah, and it's fun to take that as a jumping off point, because you can sort of go, ooh, what can I take of all the things that I love about that, and package it into something that'll grade. So yeah, super fun. Very
That's
excited about
so
that.
cool. Well, and you talked about the ghostliness. That makes me think more of Erin too, because I know you have like haunting in your book, and it sounds like the new book is going to be more haunting focused. So
Yeah. Oh, I'm obsessed. Like every time like you had like an EMF reference in there, I was like, yeah. So I was just curious because I visited Alcatraz and it was so amazing to visit. Did you get to visit as research for your new book?
No, we went to San Francisco once and we were like, oh, we'll go to Alcatraz. And it turns out, of course, you have to make a reservation. And it's a whole.
Of course.
And this was ages ago when we still lived in California. So I had to completely take my references from the internet and all the other stories. So hopefully I'll get to visit. And plus, I kind of did what I did with the Barclay Hotel and kind of made it my own. So I took all the bits, I stole what I could use, and then created my own map yet again to create some world of my own. But I hope to, because the stories of it are amazing, and it's one of those places that you just instantly have this feeling about, I think. So did you get to do the tour when you went?
I did, and it was a totally unexpectedly, like, I don't know if I want to say like impactful or chilling, or I mean it was, I didn't really know what it was going to be like, and I got there and it's really got there's a spirit to the place. There really is. So I am so looking forward to your book.
Oh,
Understatement of the year.
Thank you. So how about yours? Talk about yours.
Oh, my book? That's
yeah.
This is your book club, Fleur.
We're at the end. Your turn.
So my protagonist is a scientist who, in her first book, really gets drawn into a world of spirits and has to team up with a ghost hunting crew to figure out what's going on with her family and all this. And it's the second one is a sequel. So basically, it's just having to kind of figure out more a new threat, an old threat with maybe a new face, and doing all these kinds of the ghost hunting really plays into it, and like what are the rules and of the spirit world, and what are the rules of magic. And so I will always be there for a ghost hunting crew. And I actually in my second book I do have you mentioned that you have a TV crew on your Alcatraz.
Yes.
And that was something I had a really, really fun time writing, like a goofy TV ghost hunter crew for the second book. So
there's just such good material.
Oh my gosh, you just watch it and it writes itself.
Such fools half the time. No offense to some of these, but I'm like, wow.
I can't stop watching it. It's like like the Finding Bigfoot show, or like a Hallmark Christmas movie. Yeah. It's gonna go the same way each time, but I'm riveted. I want every beat of it. I love it.
Yeah. Very fun. Very fun. So
Fleur, I want to say that I love your book covers.
Oh, I have nothing to do with those, which is great. I don't have to do with those.
It's fantastic. And are you allowed to show the cover for the next book? I think I saw it on social media, right?
Oh, let's see if it'll go up. You can see it up there.
It's delightful.
I got a poster for it because I'm like, I have a new cover now. So yes, it is. I can take no credit for it. It's all my publisher, Viking, which they're wonderful people and they find great illustrators. Thank goodness, because I can draw a map a little bit. So they used my map, but that's about it. And yours, Josh, have like a 3D effect, don't they, to them a little bit? You're mute.
My book covers glow in the dark.
Yeah.
So they kind of have a textured varnish on them, but
very cool.
So I guess we're both very lucky in the book cover book cover department.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I love the interior illustrations for Barclay Hotel too. That's always so much fun.
It was fun to kind of give, because you get to tell the illustrator or the publisher who then tells the illustrator, like, okay, these are big scenes or these are big moments visually. I'm a very visual person when it comes to my writing, so I have a very good idea. Usually I know that the story's going somewhere when I start to see it.
Yeah.
So there's particularly in the Barclay Hotel, there's a big library where I'm like, oh, this is how that should look, and they did an excellent job with that. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I love it. Well, it's such a fun book, and if people haven't read it yet, you have to go check out Midnight at the Barclay Hotel. Perfect gift for all year round, and now's the perfect time for gifting books
Spooky
as well.
stories are always good, right?
Yes, especially spooky stories. And if we have any educators watching out there, just a quick reminder, the Spooky Middle Grade Authors, we are doing free school visits with 4 authors just like this, and 30 minutes will answer all your students' burning questions. So just head over to spookymiddlegrade.com for more information. And before we go, Fleur, do you want to just tell people where they can find you online and find your books?
Yes, so you can find me at fleurbradley.com or ftbradley.com. And there's stuff about school visits and my books and about me and a picture of me when I was little. So which is always fun for book reports and things like that. So you can find out more information there. And like Kim said, Spooky Middle Grade is where we all are, and super fun because you get to have not just one author, but a whole bunch of them. So that's really great. Yes.
It's even more terrifying that way, which is our favorite thing. Well, I just want to give a huge thank you to Erin and Josh, and especially Fleur for joining us tonight. And I don't have my little promo ready for December, but we have a really cool book for December. So we have a new author, Ira Marks, author and artist, and we're going to be reading Shark Summer, which is an amazing graphic novel and an ode to the movie Jaws. So that's going to be our December pick, and I'll be getting the date info up soon. So again, check out our YouTube channel and subscribe if you haven't already to get info about all of our upcoming videos. But thanks again to everyone for joining us tonight, and have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.